Speak today. I'm a third-year resident, so that means just 2 years ago I was an intern. And if any of you know anything about what it's like to be an intern, you know the anxiety that goes into that process and starting. I was all excited. I had bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, and I got my medical diploma and my white coat, which is freshly starched and not a speck on it, ready to go. And I moved to Pittsburgh, hung the diploma up on the wall, went to the first day of orientation, and all that kind of came down a little bit because they told me what the schedule was going to be. I was the lucky one that got to start in the cardiac ICU as the intern on night float. Great. Pulled up my white coat a little bit tighter, got ready to start for the first night. And I showed up, and there were two things in particular I remember really well about that week. One of them, there were two challenges. One of them was a relatively easy challenge for me, and the other one was very, very difficult. Luckily, the easy one came first, but I had no idea. I got there, and I'm ready to go. About 6 p.m. is my arrival time, and I met my resident, and we kind of go through a brief orientation of what I'm supposed to do as the intern doctor overnight in the cardiac ICU. And about 45 minutes later, the resident says, okay, I'm just going to go lay down for a little bit, get some food, just call me if you need anything. So I had my phone literally thumb right on the number to call her if I needed anything at all, just ready to go. And I'm sitting there kind of staring at the phone because that was our main contact with the nurses when we're in the physician workroom. And I'm just ready for anything to happen. And all of a sudden it rings, and I jump up and answer. And I said, hello? I said, this is David. I said, yeah, this is the intern, the new intern for the cardiac ICU, right? And I said, yes. They say, could you please come to room 5 as soon as you can? I think, here we go, game's on. I've been preparing for this basically my whole life. My first decision as a doctor. And I grabbed my coat, and I didn't need it, but that's what I had done in all my patient simulations. Just put on my white coat. So I was at least ready for that. And I put the white coat on, and I walked into the room, and the two nurses are kind of looking at the floor, and the patient's there, intubated, and the monitor's up, and I'm looking around and said, what's going on? And they said, we really need your help. There's a cockroach running around. We can't catch it. Can you please do something? This is my first call as a doctor in anesthesiology at the University of Pittsburgh, and I took my coat off and I said, I got this. I grew up in Kentucky. This is okay. I can handle this. This is my first medical problem. I can do it. And I caught it, and I caught it fast, and I trapped it, and I took it. Instant street credibility with the nurses. It was the best start I could have possibly wanted to my intern year. And it was crucial too. It's so important to make a good first impression, even if it's something as simple as showing up immediately to catch a bug. But that kind of credibility and making a point to rise up and do your job in the beginning was really important. I was fine for the rest of the night. The next few nights were pretty tough, but everything kind of changed that last shift, the 7th day of my first week. We had a patient, a young guy. He was actually my age at the time, 27 years old, had a cardiomyopathy that was previously undiagnosed. This guy was previously healthy, normal, playing basketball with his friends, and just dropped to the ground. Short of breath, he'd been in the ICU for several days. The prognosis was not good. I had been the key contact person. I was the intern rounding on him every day, and I got to know some of the family pretty well. And each day I kind of thought in the back of my head, I'm not sure they really get it. I don't really know if they know what's going on here, but I sure hope that I don't have to be the one to have that conversation, because I'm not ready for it. Wasn't quite ready to get to that level. My final night when I got there, we're going through the patients, looking at the data, and I found out that his blood pressure had dropped significantly, and he was now a maximum pressor requirement. We talked to the resident said, you should probably call in the family, you know them best. Do you feel comfortable having that conversation? I did not, but I was too proud to say that I needed help and I needed backup, and I said, no, I'll do it. I'll talk to him. And they came in, and I told them the really, really bad news that he's not getting any better. And when they asked me for a time frame, and I said, I don't know, but we think maybe hours. And they just lost it. I wasn't prepared for it. I didn't know how to deal with it. No matter how many times you're in a patient simulation with patients that are actors in medical school, and you go through the scenarios and you read about it and you practice it in your head, there's nothing like that first time having that difficult conversation. This guy was my age. Their family did not think that it was going to go in this direction. I hadn't told them the whole week that it was going to go in that direction until that one night. They became angry. They said, "You're letting this happen. Somebody's got to be responsible for it. How could you do this to our son?" And it made me realize how important it is to have the role models in your life and to have the teachers that help position you in such a way that you never feel like you're too proud to ask for help, or that you never feel like you're out there alone, that there's always somebody there for you. It was really rough. I wasn't willing to be real with them, and I realized that being real is such an important part of leadership from the top down. Admitting humility, not being too proud. One of the best teachers I had was in medical school. He was an ICU doctor, actually, and he'd been doing it for 40 years. He was an ICU attending for 40 years. He said in the very beginning, he said, "I know I've been doing this for a long time, but look, nobody's perfect, and most of you are students, but I know that there are always ways that I can help you better to be better learners, and there are better ways to do the ICU. I'm not claiming that I have it down." And he said, "For that reason, I do what one of my friends from high school did." He was a captain in the U.S. Navy. He would have weekly lunches with people, and from everybody from the top down, the entire staff, so he could better learn how to serve them, and be a better captain of the ship. So he said, "I'm going to do the same thing in my ICU." He tells the story to us how this gentleman's name is Mike Abrashoff. He's a captain in the U.S. Navy. 20 years ago, he took over the USS Benfold, which at the time was in the lowest quartile in performance for all the ships in the U.S. Navy. It also was in the red financially, and he made the same kind of point. He said, I don't pretend that I know everything on this ship, and that I can't get any information from even the people in the lowest ranks. So I'm going to use that, and every day I'm going to meet with different people, and before long I'll have met with everybody, and I want you to be completely honest with me and tell me if there's anything you think that needs to change. He met from everybody from the top officers all the way down to custodial staff on the ship, even the people that were painting it. One of the painters said, "Sir, do you know how often we paint the ship?" He said, "Yes, about 6 times a year." So that's right, every other month we paint the ship. Did you ever paint your house? And he said, "Yeah, I've painted my house." And he said, "It sucks, doesn't it?" And he said, "Well, yeah." He said, "What are you getting at?" He said, "Well, have you ever stopped to think, why do we paint the ship every other month? It's because we use iron ferrous nuts and bolts that attach all of our equipment on the top of the ship and to the sides of it, and every time it gets wet with salt water, which is all of the time when they're at sea, all of the rust stains go down the sides of the ship, and they have to repaint it. It takes about a month to paint the ship, and then another month goes by before they have to do it again. That's 6 times. That's extremely expensive. It's a lot of manpower." He said, "Have you ever heard of stainless steel?" He said, "You mean the stuff that doesn't rust and create streaks when it comes in contact with salt water?" He says, "Exactly." And so the captain, this is a painter, takes this advice, and he takes the U.S. military Visa card, and he goes around and he buys new stainless steel nuts and bolts and other metallic attachments to keep all of the material on the deck. And they went from painting the ship once every other month to twice a year, and saved the U.S. military over $1.5 million. And it's other things like that and other acts that took that ship from being in the lowest quartile to winning the best award for the best ship in the entire U.S. Navy. And it's that kind of mentality. He took a lot of advice from people lower than him. And my attending's telling this story, and all I'm thinking is, oh great, we're going to be going around the ICU basically like a military and taking orders, and yeah, right, this guy's really intimidating. He's been doing this for 35 years. I'm just a medical student. There's no way that myself or any of the other students are going to suggest that he should do his job differently. And sure enough, at the end of the first week, one of the nursing students during our lunch after rounds, and if anybody has ever been on rounds in the ICU, you know how large the teams can get. There are attending physicians, there are residents, fellows, medical students, nursing students, nurses, pharmacists. I mean, this is a very large, intimidating group, many of them wearing white coats. And the way that it works is you go from one patient to the next, but you don't actually go in the rooms for a lot of reasons, partially infection control and time, and because it takes a long time to do this. But what happens is you stand there and you talk about the patient for 15 or 20 minutes or so, and the whole time you're kind of glancing in the room, you're checking monitors, and for patients that are awake and patients that have visitors, imagine what that feels like to be in this glass box and be talked about when you're critically ill, but then the whole group just kind of walks away. They make a few notes, write some orders in the computer, and then move on to the next patient. Well, you don't know that. You just see them walking away. A nursing student says at the end of this lunch meeting with the attending, says, I have an idea. She said, I just got out of Mrs. H's room, who was a new admission overnight. This is after rounds. I just got out of her room, and she was in tears. She said, I don't understand why you can't tell me I'm dying. And she said, what are you talking about? You're actually doing much better. We're planning on sending you out of the unit. She said, well, why did everyone come around and just point at me? And nobody had the courage to tell me that I'm dying and come in and talk to me. And she said, I have the idea that maybe if it's okay, if it's not a big inconvenience, I could stay behind after every patient and just go in the room for maybe just a minute or two, just to tell them that, hey, we just rounded, everything's okay. Here are a couple of things we talked about, but somebody's going to come in later, maybe the person that rounded on you this morning, and they're going to fill you in and tell you everything that we talked about and what the plan is for the day. And he said, actually, that's a great idea. And he said, I've been doing this for 40 years and I've never thought about that. Let's do it. And you would not believe the difference by the end of that month in the patient experience and also the family experience. It was absolutely amazing to see how patients responded when they felt like they were a part of their own care, when they felt like they were such a priority that they stopped rounds just to touch base with them and family. The reason is because they were part of the care. It immediately integrated it. It made no difference in the length of rounds, and then became a system-wide policy that was adopted across the board, and all because an attending physician who had been doing it for a long time, just like in the U.S. Navy, they've been painting the ships the same way for 200 years. The attending physician said, I'm not perfect. I want you to tell me how I can do my job better and help create a better learning environment and care environment. And I think that's really, really important. It's stories like this that help define leaders' legacy. They help shape the future of young learners and shape their careers, young learners like myself. But more importantly, they help create lasting impressions and create once-in-a-lifetime experiences for patients that are in the hospital, gravely ill. I want to thank you so much for allowing me to be a part of this event. It's really an honor to speak with all of you, and enjoy the rest of the day.